Hello everybody, my name is Beverly Scullen. I work in the Organisational Development and Learning team in HR, and today I'm recording for you the second webinar in our Coaching for Performance series. This webinar today is going to cover the Appraising Performance meeting. So I'm starting for you with an introduction to Coaching for Performance, just to remind you it's our new performance framework and it's built on the principle of continuous coaching conversations. So we have 3 levels of conversation. We have our informal one-to-ones, check-ins and catch-ups. We have our formal quarterly review and goal-setting meeting. And twice a year in September and March, we have our appraising performance meeting. And this webinar is going to focus on this mid-year appraising performance meeting in September. And we also have a pre-recorded webinar for you already covering the quarterly review and goal setting conversations. And we now have a new webinar for you covering the SAP recording actions, which covers the sort of SAP screens and how to upload things and how to complete that record. And you can find out more information about our coaching for performance toolkits, our download templates, and the webinars from the links on Work and the source. So here's a recap on what will have been happening up until this point. So throughout the year, you will have been having your regular one-to-one conversations, and these really happen as and when is necessary. And you will have held at least one quarterly review and goal-setting meeting. Now we're at the point in September where you need to undertake the first formal appraisal review covering the previous 6 months. Just to recap on the quarterly reviews, here's what you would have discussed at the quarterly review meeting. And here's some of the questions we shared with you last time about how to kind of work your way through that conversation. So you need to start your midpoint appraisal review with a repeat or refresh of the quarterly review meeting so that the last 3 months are covered and the goals are checked or reset for the next 3 months. What's the difference then between the quarterly review meeting and the performance appraisal meeting? Well, the mid-year review meeting is the quarterly review meeting with some add-ons. It's an informal meeting where you need to give the employee an indicative performance rating for the year to date. And what does indicative mean? Well, what it means is that we're halfway through the appraisal year and this is how the employee is doing right now. This ensures that both parties leave the conversation with the same understanding of how it's been going up until this point. So if something's not been going right, there's time to address it over the rest of the year. And if things are going really well, then the employee needs to know or knows then what they need to do to meet that standard for the rest of the year. But you must remember that ratings can change at the year end, depending on this performance during the last 6 months and on how people are doing during that time. This 6-monthly review is really also a good opportunity, based on the conversation to that point, to discuss your employees' strengths, any development needs that they have to build on those strengths or to make improvements, and perhaps any aspirations they have for the future as part of a personal development plan. After the meeting, you need to write up your notes, record it. We have a template for you, but you need to review your discussion and the rating given, and you need to record it onto SAP. And as I've mentioned, we've recorded for you now a separate webinar covering those actions and screens you need to complete that process. And after all of the ratings have been added onto the system by the deadline, it means that HR can run reports on the distribution of ratings that can be reviewed by the corporate director and CMT as part of our moderation process. So, how do you reach your performance rating? This is something that requires you to use your judgment as a manager. You need to take into account the full picture and put a score on the door. Naturally, managers want to get this right and they want to be fair, and it can be quite a nerve-wracking thing to reach this and give this decision. So we've put together some guidance here to help you reach that judgment. On the right hand side here is the performance triangle that we mentioned in our toolkit and in our goal setting meeting. And this reminds us that your rating must be based on the whole job, which includes the goal set in values and behaviours, the requirements of a role and the current circumstances. So just look at each of those in a bit more detail now. The goals and behaviour. This is what you've been doing in your quarterly review meeting. So you'll be looking at whether or not the person has met their goals, what are their work output like, have they met the standards, the quality, the turnaround times that you expect, and have they shown the right behaviours in keeping with our pact values. So that's proud, ambitious, collaborative and trustworthy. Then you need to look at how they're doing in the rest of the role. The quarter review tends to focus on priorities for the period, but there are whole lots of things that people are doing in their job that's not discussed in the performance, the quarterly review, but needs to be discussed now to make sure that they are still covering the rest of their job role. So has everything else been covered to a good standard? And has anything else been left that shouldn't have been, or are there any other worry areas? So that might include our minimum standards and perhaps completing mandatory training. On top of that, we need to consider what are the current circumstances or context of the role. Were there any particular circumstances that made the work unusually demanding or the performance more exceptional than usual? And how were the role requirements delivered and what was exceeding us about this performance, so that you can record this in your discussion and on your review afterwards. And also, how does what this person did compare to other people doing the same role and responding to the same circumstances? So considering all of the elements in this triangle, you can highlight any areas of improvement or development for the future and highlight examples of great practice and good examples that you can record in your review discussion. And rating needs to take into account all of the above: fulfilling the role, meeting the goals and showing the values. And all these things are what achieving looks like. So another way of helping you to think about reaching the rating. As we've said, most people will get the achieving rating because on the whole, they're doing a good job and they're doing everything that's expected of them, even within the context of this triangle. So maybe the question for you now is to think about, are there any factors or circumstances that might move your rating decision away from achieving towards either needs development or exceeding? And we've put together some examples here of things that might help you to draw out those factors. So for perhaps edging towards the needs development rating, these would include people who are new in role, people who are on probation, they're not yet performing the whole job, they're still developing parts of their role. Also, it could be people who are not keeping up with their goals, or who are falling short of their minimum standards, or where there are examples of poor behaviour that really need improvement or addressing. Likewise, on the exceeding side, are there really good examples of where this person has surpassed goals and expectations while still performing in the whole role? Have they delivered against the odds or in extremely challenging context? Can it be seen how they've exceeded the goals and requirements? And can you quantify or measure that and describe that in a way that shows the impact? And are they recognised by others in the team or perhaps beyond as somebody who's a really good role model, or perhaps even groundbreaking or exceptional in their role? So if you can pinpoint those factors and record them, then that will help you to justify your ratings. Also remember that all of this is in the context of the role. So what might be considered achieving in a senior role could also be considered as exceeding in a more junior role. Another point to think about when you're reading your rating, if you're really not sure where you should put somebody, or you want to think through your decision, you should always sound this out first with your manager or perhaps your manager peers who are managing people in similar roles, to make sure that what you're thinking is consistent with what they're doing. And note that all ratings are reviewed in the moderation process afterwards by your leadership team. So you must be able to describe in your review meeting and record afterwards what it is, what achievements or improvement areas you've noticed to help you reach your rating. So looking at the performance rating scale as a whole, what we've said is that we expect most people will be doing a good job and will get the achieved rating, because it means that you're broadly achieving your goals, you're meeting the behaviours required, and you're fully delivering on the requirements of the role. And that is what most people are doing. It's a really broad category, and it could also include people who are doing a great job in some areas. And it could also include people who are on the cusp at the other end, who haven't quite met all of their goals, but on the whole, they're still doing a really good job. It's a wide category. We also have the needs development category, and as I said, this would typically include people on probation who are new to the role, or people who are falling short against the role in some way. And you can see that this group is quite likely to be affected by the number of starters that we have in the organisation in any one period. We also have the exceeding outstanding ratings, and as mentioned, these are people who are doing beyond what's expected. They're kind of head and shoulders above others. They're easy to spot, and they will be doing something that you can describe that shows that they're exceeding. And we also have a small number of people who are not meeting the standard at all. And so this is how we get a normal distribution of ratings across the organisation. And this is the kind of pattern that the CMT and your leadership teams will be looking for when they do their moderation. So how do you document the review? So you still need to complete the quarterly review template, which we've already discussed in the previous webinar, and you can download that template from our pages. And we also have a new template for you now covering the performance appraisal meeting, this 6-monthly meeting. It's a very simple template. We try and keep it to 1 page. It's quite small on this slide, but the main questions in those blocks there on the left-hand side are: what has been achieved in the previous 6 months? Can you summarise what's happened? How has the person shown the behaviours and the values? So a place for you to just do a quick summary there. Any notes that you've made about future learning and career aspirations or development needs, and in the far right hand side, the rating that you've given against each of those findings, and what the overall performance rating you're going to give is at the bottom. So record all this on this template, upload it to SAP, and then the employee gets to review it via SAP and confirm the record. And all of this needs to be done and completed by the end of September. So just to quickly tell you about recording on SAP, as I've mentioned, there is a separate webinar covering the screens and the actions, but some of you might be more familiar with the screens that we have, and there are just 4 basic actions that need to cover in those screens. So it's attaching the performance review document, it's entering the performance rating on the assessment tab, saving and submitting the record. So it goes workflow to the employee can open it up, have a look at it, check that they're happy with it, that it reflects what they discuss with you, and they just complete the process. And once that person has completed the process, the record becomes closed and the mid-year actions are completed. And that all has to be done by the end of September. Here's my summary now of the whole session. So you need to prepare for the mid-year review conversations by thinking about the quarter review and the conversations that you've held so far throughout the year. The performance review will cover the whole performance triangle and the full range of factors that will impact on the overall performance rating. You need to be clear that the achieving rating is a great outcome and means the individual is fully meeting all of the aspects of the role. New employees may still be developing in the role, and that's to be expected. So make sure that you talk about this as part of employee induction and that you manage expectations accordingly. You can speak to HR about anyone who may need support if they're not achieving in role. And you can talk to your own manager if you're unsure about your rating decision. Also, you could always adjourn or reschedule a meeting if you need to take in some extra information that's been given to you during the meeting and you think that might affect the rating that you want to give. Also reminding you to look at the learning and development opportunities for staff in the light of what you've heard in the meeting, and to think about these in connection with career development and career aspirations, and not just to confine this to appraisal time. Once you have written up your meeting, you need to upload your review document onto SAP, record your rating, and send the employee record on to the employee to sign off by the end of September. And that is the whole appraisal review. So I'm just ending here with a reminder of the overall timelines. I'm sorry it's a bit small. In Q1, the first reviews happen in June time. We're now in Q2 for the mid-year reviews, which need to happen by end of September. The next Q3 review is due in December, and the final end of year reviews will happen in March. If you've got any questions about our Coaching for Performance framework, you can look up our toolkits and download our templates from the links on Your Work and the source. And you can always contact HR through the HR Service Now request. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.